Yeah.
All right. So we are now live. All right, folks. Welcome, everyone, to the very first annual Visceral Pleasure and Extreme Cinema event. Yes. In celebration of 2 absolutely disgusting years of Kelly's Taboo Terrors, I wanted to bring together a bunch of incredible people to discuss something controversial, and that's extreme horror. I am Kelly. Hey. From Spinsters of Horror. And not only do I write for our website and other publications, but my co-host Jessica and I have a monthly podcast called I Spit on Your Podcast. I created Taboo Terrors as I found myself drifting more and more towards these very intriguing, scandalous, transgressive films. So now I write and podcast about them too. I essentially have fallen in love with extreme horror. So I have to say, content and trigger warnings, folks, for all of the panels today. If you know anything about Kelly's Taboo Terrors, then I hope you know what you're getting into. But I want to remind folks that there will be discussions of themes and films that might be upsetting to some viewers. Topics such as rape, assault, death, violence, torture, necrophilia, pedophilia, and more may be mentioned. So viewers' discretion is advised. So panel number 1 today is called Disturbing Films for a Curious Mind, Extreme Cinema for the Newcomer. Extreme horror isn't for everyone, but there are some people out there that are intrigued by these films. My co-host, Jess, behind the scenes right now, is one of those people. So call it morbid curiosity that makes people want to hear about films like Cannibal Holocaust, a Serbian film, and Irreversible. Some people might want to dive right into the abyss, but others might just want to dip their toes in first. In this panel, we will talk about the films we think are a good starting point for those individuals who want to take a look behind the curtain into the world of extreme horror. So our panelists today, and I will go one by one and introduce everyone. First up, fellow Torontonian here, Allison Lang. So Allison is a writer, editor, zine maker based in Toronto. She has written for Rue Morgue, by NWR.com and Art of the Title, among others. Her book, Women with Guts, a collection of essays and interviews with women working in horror, was published as part of the Rue Morgue Library in 2017. She also contributed to Satanic Panic, Pop Culture Paranoia in the 1980s by Spectacular Optical, with a chapter on Geraldo Rivera's Devil Worship special. She is presented on topics related to horror and gender for the Axe Moon Film Festival, Final Girls Film Festival, and the DePaul University Pop Culture Conference. She is currently a jurist for Axe Moon and a board member of Blood in the Snow, a Canadian horror film festival. You can learn more about Allison at womenandSongs666.com. And then we have Jerry Sampson. Jerry is a horror writer, screenwriter, and film analyst. She has a monthly feature on Rue Morgue's website called Beautiful Filth, which focuses on extreme horror films through the female gaze. She writes for Ghouls Magazine, Scream Magazine, Horror Obsessive, and other genre sites, and is currently in pre-production on her first short film. You can find her on Instagram at The Sleeper Must Awaken. Oh boy, I'm sorry, Jerry. The Sleeper Must Awaken. Oh, I just messed that up. I'm so sorry.
It's fine.
It's more of the
Sleeper Must Awaken.
There were extra letters there for no reason. The Sleeper Must Awaken. Thank you. Next up is Ariel Beska. Ariel is a filmmaker in the realms of horror and documentary. She recently wrapped her horror short, Our First Priority, which she wrote, directed, and successfully kickstarted, due out later this year. She is a regular contributor to Ghouls Magazine, a comic book reviewer for Comics Bookcase, and the founder and co-host and executive producer of Ride the Omnibus podcast. It's a podcast parked at the intersection of pop culture and social justice. At age 3, a bad babysitter showed her A Nightmare on Elm Street, and she became forever hooked on watching films through her fingers. And last up, Rabia Satabi. Rabia is a well-seasoned pop culture specialist and a multidisciplinary marketing professional. Born in Europe with Asian African roots, she comes from a very involved and diverse household. She is outspoken on issues that pertain to her identity as a queer disabled woman of color and brings a unique perspective to how she consumes media and culture. As the founder of Culture Agency, she helps young people of color and women by training them and introducing them to the marketing industry with an emphasis on using and implementing new tech in sustainable ways. Under the brand Culture Curator, she has hosted a variety of conversations with important cultural figures from around the world on radio, television, and various social media platforms. As the Queen of Horror on Clubhouse, she regularly hosts global horror events discussing specific countries and their relationship with the horror genre, as well as interviewing prominent international directors, including a recent interview with Joko Anwar.
Joko Anwar, yes.
Thank you. Okay, and I am your host for today. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I'm so very excited. So our first question up for all of you folks today is, what do you think it is about extreme horror that makes people curious about it? Maybe we'll start with Ariel.
Well, in terms of the interest in extreme horror, I think for everyone, there's this secret love of everything that's transgressive in the world. Whether we want to necessarily respect that about ourselves or not is another question. But I think underlying everything, everyone has this sense that the status quo is seriously, for lack of a better term, fucked up. And so I think on some basic level, while normal horror films may give you some sense of boundaries being broken and then restored again in some sense, people are always drawn to the extreme because they want to see the taboo. They want to see the taboo consumption of things that are supposed to be in the outer world being in the inner world, and in the inner world in the outer world. And I feel like it's always because of these broken boundaries that never quite get resolved that feel like this deep psychological longing that we all have, whether we want to actually admit it to ourselves or not.
I like that. How about you, Allison?
I agree with everything Ariel said. I think a lot of times too, you're a horror fan, but you kind of reach I don't want to say you reach a limit, but when you kind of see the canon, I guess, all the slashers and all the monster movies and all the, ghoulies, ghosties, zombies, gore, whatever. And then you're like, oh, there's a whole other world that I haven't unearthed yet, that like really, pushes boundaries and plays with stuff that I'm less comfortable with. And, all these tropes that we become so accustomed to in slasher movies, all those beats and that timing and the camera that like holds a kill for like a second and you see it and then it looks away. To have movies that don't look away, like that's very seductive in a lot of ways. It's awful. Like it's sometimes it's terrible to experience. You're like, please, no more. Yeah, I would really agree. It's just like you just and again, as you said, Kelly, like it's not for everyone. Some horror fans, there's a stop line, right? And it's like, I've looked enough into the abyss. I don't need to go all the way to the portal of hell. And then some of us are like, I just want a little look, or maybe I want a look. And just, see how much hell I can expose myself to.
Yeah. Absolutely. I love that you bring up the fact that if you're a horror fan for a significant amount of time, and this can happen to some people, sometimes it doesn't happen to anyone, but I feel like I'm in that camp where it's been 25 years and I still like, I'm going to say regular horror movies, absolutely mainstream indie. I love all that. But even though I think horror movies themselves can be transgressive, subversive, like a lot of social commentaries, a lot of stuff going on with them, I feel like so many extreme horror films take it even to the next level. They are even more so. And and maybe even going through a pandemic during the last year and a half has made my interest in them even stronger. Lots of extra time as well to watch movies, but absolutely. Does anybody else feel that way? Did you get to like a certain point and you're just like, well, yep, I need to see something else?
I think I got to that point. And once you get to that point, I think this is so great because I did a lot of like just exploring on my own. And, when I was younger, and you never really know what your boundaries are until you hit that one movie that's like both like, I don't know if I can do this. But then also, like, can I do this? I mean, there is something about certain films that really kind of test your will, and it's not like, I would never say, wow, you don't watch extreme horror, that's crazy. In fact, I think for all of us, it's probably the other way around. Like, oh my God, you know, how often do we get like, how can you watch this shit? Yeah. But I think like, just like society, I think we have a huge kind of obsession with our, like, bodies and, you know, death. We like, at least my society wants to pretend like we don't die and we don't have to. And these types of movies really bring everything, like Ariel said, that's kind of hidden, and it just shoves it into your face, and you're really confronted with the inevitable. And that's not to say that like what happens in these movies is the inevitable, but it's a dark world, and it's a dark time, and sometimes kind of pushing yourself and pushing your boundaries to see just how much you can take is exciting. And, you know, it's just like horror, mainstream horror, it is so formulaic so often. And really what a lot of these movies do is take that formula and just, like, you know, totally throw it out the window. And, you know, these aren't narrative films all the time, and not following any kind of set structure. And I just think it's a fascination kind of thing. You know, we're fascinated. And honestly, seeing the gore that's in a lot of these movies, it's incredible. It's also just incredible craftsmanship sometimes.
Yes.
With what they can show. Like,
Definitely.
if you ever wondered what your body looks like as it's like decomposing, go watch Phantom. You know, so yeah, it's definitely, I think there's a good reason to be curious about it. And, you know, whether or not you delve in, that's your prerogative.
Yeah, right. Yeah. How about Rabia? Do you have anything else why you think people, maybe is it just curiosity, or we want to see something taboo, like seems so scandalous, and maybe we should be watching this? Well, what do you think?
Well, everything everyone just mentioned, but also, I mean, I think at one point it becomes a challenge, especially if you're a part of the horror community. Then you've seen a lot of stuff, and you go like, okay, can I go further than this? Can we go even a little bit further? What is going to be the thing for me that's going to make me go like, okay, I can't do this. I can't watch this. This is too much. So especially the longer you watch horror and the more extreme you start looking for, and you start going outside of those bounds of what we call mainstream or regular horror, you start getting desensitized up to a certain point, right? You don't get scared as much. So to get that new thrill and to expand, you know, you start looking for those taboo things, so and more extreme stuff. Like, okay, will that invoke some type of reaction, emotional, you know, like some type of response from me? What do I need to see after having seen so much, both in real life and in films, to still invoke some type of a reaction, some type of fear, some type of thrill? And for some people that can be roller coasters, and for people like us, it's extreme horror movies. I mean, you're not going to see me in a roller coaster, but, you know, put a list up of like a extreme horror iceberg, and I will go and see till which length we can actually get. Yeah. So yeah, that's the thrill, I guess, of it as well. But definitely also, you know, the fact that it's taboo, that there are themes in there that make, like Ariel said, you know, the unseen scene, that there's so many things that we unearth in extreme horror that lie underneath society's like cloak, basically, is a very interesting thing to see as well, because the themes that we see come back in extreme horror are often things that do exist, but that we don't want to confront ourselves with. So, yeah.
Absolutely. I think regular, again, we'll say regular. Let's just do it. Let's just do it for the sake of today.
Normie horror, yeah.
Regular and extreme, that you are going to get that visceral response. And I feel like with a lot of people in certain movies, for myself, like I watched The Devil's Candy when that came out, and that produced a pretty visceral response, and that is a quote normal kind of horror movie. That creepy guy just showing up in the little girl's bed, like I got chills. And I was like, oh, this is fantastic. But you're right, the visceral response is going to be even more. You're going to be deeply uncomfortable. Thing outside my window. Anyways, I'm going to move on to our next question here. So, what were some of the first films that you folks watched, or what introduced you to the genre specifically? I'll say for myself, but going back, and I remember Headless, I watched, a Serbian film, one of the August Underground films, and then Ichi the Killer. Those are the ones I can remember on the top of my head that really like showed me some intense scenes and subject matter. How about you, Allison? We'll start with you.
I'm laughing just because I'm like, Kelly, you started with those.
I had a partner at the time that was really into Asian cinema, and he was the one that would find maybe like this top 10 most goriest movies ever made, and then we're like, okay, let's see if we can download them and find them. This is going back like 8-9 years ago.
Yeah.
So I think that helped me watch some of these movies. But then there was like a period of time where I didn't really see them, and then over the last couple of years, again, like I said, I've been going down deep into it, and I just am obsessed with it now. But yep, those are the ones that I started with and kept going, which I guess says something about me. I don't know.
The one that I started with, which I don't know if it is really an extreme film, but it's often included in these lists, is actually Necromantic.
Yes.
And that was, yeah, you guys probably have a similar story. I remember as a younger person, like, you know, I would look in Fangoria and there would always be ads for Necromantic in the back, you know, like the movie ads or whatever.
Yeah.
And I did that thing where you don't watch the movie because you're not sure how to find it, but you read everything you can find about it. And I heard the theme from Necromantic, which, as you guys remember, is like this schmaltzy.
I love it.
So beautiful. And I was like, I love this music. And like, this movie sounds so disgusting. And I watched it, and I was definitely shocked. Like, I was like, whoa, like, because, yeah, they were all things that, you know, like I had never seen ejaculation in a horror movie. I had never seen necrophilia, even implied necrophilia in any horror film at that point. Like, I was still pretty new in my horror journey in general, I think. So that really set the tone. And it's funny, I watched Necromantic like not too long ago, a couple of years ago, and my experience was totally different. I like was laughing. I was like, oh, this is so like charming. Like it's kind of funny. Like I missed all the humor the first time. And yeah, I have to say I quite enjoyed it. I think it's an amazing movie. Like it's just, yeah, it is what it is. But yeah, as a starter extreme film, that was kind of the first one. And then I had a similar entry point to you, Kelly, where, you know, I started looking at the lists, and I particularly, once I started getting into the new French extremity films like Inside and especially High Tension, and later on Martyrs, that was a good sort of entry point into going into deeper stuff. And that stuff is interesting. And I know we'll probably talk about this later, but like, because it has one foot in the art film world, and then one foot in, you know, kind of hardcore horror. It was just interesting. Yeah, it was a very formative time for me starting with those movies. Yeah, for sure.
How about you, Jerry?
I think I was thinking about this because, you know, it's like going back, and I haven't been I've been a lifelong horror fan, but, you know, the extreme horror, it's really kind of kicked into high gear in the past couple of years. And I think it was probably Gaspar Noé. Irreversible was like the first one. And from that, I went, like Allison, into New French Extremity hard. And we have in Portland here, we have sorry about my cat, he's going to get in here. We have a place called Movie Madness that basically has every movie that you can never find. And so I just started kind of delving into all the New French Extremities. And then I started listening to a podcast called That's Dark, and they cover, they do really, really good kind of analysis of certain extreme horrors. And so from there, I just started like going and finding the ones that they were, you know, talking about. And but Gaspar Noé was definitely like that. I'm a huge fan of his storytelling and his films, and that was my entry point. And I think that it's because it is, I mean, it's really fucked up, but it's also really accessible. You know, it's not like your shaky cam, August Underground, you know, filthy camera kind of stuff. It's the step, you know, in that kind of direction from normal films into just normal films with fucked up shit. So that was definitely, I credit him.
Excellent. Rabia, how about you? What were the handful of the first films that you saw that shocked you?
I have an interesting I have a maybe a weird backstory. So I grew up obviously in Europe because born and raised here, and I come from an Asian and an African family. And for us, it's normal to watch horror at a very young age. Basically, not because you're introduced to it by your parents, but they just put it on, and if you're in the room, well, that's what you're watching. So I watched The Thing when I was 6 because my aunt came visiting from India. My mom and my aunt were watching it, and they were like, "You're in the room, so, and we're adults. We're watching this. If you want to stay in the room, then cool. But this is what we're watching." So I was 6 when I watched The Thing. That was my introduction to horror in general. But all my cousins were older than me, so we watched horror a lot. Like, Asians consume a lot of horror. Like, it's like family pastime almost. So by the time I was like young teen, I was already indeed watching the Ichi the Killers and the Guinea Pig, even because one of my cousins was like, "Oh yeah, there's this cool Japanese movie. We're gonna watch it at one of the boring, you know, family gatherings that we had." And I was the youngest, but they were always like, "Yeah, you can come. It's okay." And talking about ejaculate, I mean, Ichi the Killer actually.
That title sequence, you know.
Oh my god! And how old would I have been? I was like literally just in high school. So by the time I was near my end of high school, I was like, I love this stuff so much. I'm going to work for a horror film festival, which I did, the Amsterdam Fantastic Film Festival. And they had more stuff there because everything was fresh. They had the French extremity trend was just coming up. So I saw stuff like Martyrs, L'Intérieur, and High Tension in the cinema. And I was like barely 18 years old, not even. So I grew up in horror so much that extremity for me became like this thing that I would seek out because, well, yeah, I had seen a lot. If you're 13, 14 years old and you've seen Guinea Pig, then I mean, where else can you go?
I don't even know. I just watched those for the first time like 2 months ago. I watched a bunch of them for the first time. Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen all 6 of the Guinea Pig movies by now. And I kind of still do like look for stuff to test myself and to see like, oh, new stuff is coming out. It's going to be like really visceral and such. I do have a hard line that I tell people, like, I will only watch fiction. I do not watch any actual, actual snuff films or anything like that. None of the Mondo stuff or anything that comes from Brazil. So, but as long as it's fiction, you can put anything on. I will watch it and I will test myself. It's that roller coaster ride feeling, definitely. Yeah.
And Ariel, what were the formative first films that you watched?
So my story is very similar to Rabia's, although I don't come from an Asian background. I grew up in Asia over the summertime. Like, I spent a lot of time abroad as a kid, and my mother regularly worked in Australia and Singapore. And so I spent a lot of time glued to the TV watching Extremity from Hong Kong and Japan. And so Takashi Miike was my shit at like age 13 and beyond. And Ichi the Killer was probably my first title for sure. And probably the entire filmography of Miike got aired at some point on TV in those pockets of time when I was hanging out there. And I saw a lot of things that my parents would not have approved of, but that's okay. But when I came back to America, I got very into French extremity via Gaspar Noé, just like Jerry. And Irreversible was sort of my entry point into that offshoot as well, into getting involved in his cinema. But I always felt like it was a part of loving cinema as a whole, that it wasn't even just about horror cinema when you get into the world of extremity. Because I feel like there's a lot more happening that pushes the boundaries of storytelling and cinematography when you get into the world of extremity than you get in the regular horror world.
Yeah. Agreed. Absolutely. So since these are our first films, which sounds very intense, talk about visceral experiences for our first time, maybe not the best route for everyone. Okay, so my next question is, so what films would you recommend for the morbidly curious, or what are your like intro to extreme horror 101 movies? What would you say, like pick like 2 to 3 that you think would be like good intro movies? Like we're just going to dip our toe into it, see what you think, and kind of go from there. So I'll start with you, Jerry.
I really recommend starting with the new French extremity. And I don't mean starting with, well, honestly, Martyrs is such a great movie that I do recommend having that be an early one. It's not gonna, you're not dealing with, well, you're dealing with a lot, but you're not dealing with a Serbian film. So, but really, if you're going from like slashers, in horror, then head over and see High Tension. It's just a nice little stepping stone. Not the whole new French extremity. You can, it gets interesting, but really accessibility wise, I think like Martyrs, High Tension, and then I also have to say Pola X is a really intense film, but it's one that it's really beautiful, and the story is gorgeous, and everything about it is amazing. So I always like to recommend Pola X too, because it's not like hard extreme, but it definitely is extreme. It's dealing with themes that are in that genre. So that's my recommendation. I have a lot more that I would say that I can say to stay away from, but
that's our next question.
I know. It's just like introduction wise.
You said Pola X. I've never heard of that, and I'm now making my own watch list. So folks watching this, start making your watch list if you're curious. So Pola X, where is that from, country-wise?
That's France. Right? Yeah.
I'm noticing a trend here. It's also in my recommendations as well. Allison, what are your intro 101 movies?
Sorry, I have a cat. Also,
we all have cats. Mine, I'm sure, are coming up anytime now.
Cats all around.
Oh, geez. So please bear with me. I would say honestly, it depends where you're coming from as a horror fan.
Right.
So there's a couple of things I would think about. And again, I think because we're all women identified people here, or like if you're, and I'm going to address as if you like this audience is women or non-binary people, because I think we've heard enough about cis men and what extreme horror films. I don't care. But yeah, for women and for non-binary people, I think if you're a gore hound and you're looking to like go to the next level for gore, it might almost be fun to like Herschel Gordon Lewis Blood Peace, just because it's not like I find it's not like a lot of extreme films, like it's like not guinea pig level, and it's a bit cartoony, but it's definitely the first time I saw that I was like, whoa, like this kicked it up a little bit more than what I'm used to. And and it's it's fun. but it's also very trashy. And it does poke at some taboos. Like it sort of picks around the edges without quite going right in. And then I would also say, oh my God, I'm having a little bit of a brain fart. Oh, three extremes, and start with dumplings.
Yes.
And if you're like, well, I'm a bit queasy, but that kind of ruled. Then you can kind of watch the next. You start with number 2, and then finally go with Imprint and see how far you can get into that. Whew.
Yes.
I like that anthology because it's such a good introduction to those 3 masters of Asian, not even just horror cinema, but cinema writ large.
Yeah, absolutely.
I found it, like, for me, I definitely approached it in that way where I was like, okay, dumplings, I like this. And then the second film, I was like, whoa, that's intense. And then I was like, well, scarred for life. What's next? But yeah, I think that would be my recommendation, is to take, forgive the pun, but little bites. Bites out of 3 extremes.
Excellent. Rabia, intro films. What do you think?
Ooh, some of my lists were already mentioned, so I'm regathering my thoughts real quick. But I would say, which is not very extreme, but some people find this an extreme film, Dead Girl. It's a very low bar to cross and to go like, okay, we're just testing it a little bit. So Dead Girl would be interesting. One of my fellow countrymen, I detest the first one. The second one is more extreme, but if you want to dip into it, the first one is better to watch. The Human Centipede, which is made by Tom Six, who is Dutch. And Martyrs was already mentioned. 3 Extremes were already mentioned. So I'm gonna go with another French extremity, which is L'Intérieur, or Inside the original. This is a step up, but it's not all the way to Guinea Pig or Atros or any of that kind of stuff. So we're still in the safe levels, in a sense. Yeah.
And Ariel.
Well, okay. As a woman that advocates generally for female filmmakers in horror and extreme horror, I am going to recommend a female-made extreme horror that is a good entry-level point, I think, for a lot of women. In My Skin by Marina Van, which is very much on the scale of like relatable for anyone who has body dysmorphia, body issues in general. And I feel like for most women, this is a great entry point because it plays with surrealism at such a level that it makes it easier to connect with the levels of gore and extremity that it goes into, but it's not so heavy that you can't relate to it because it's so deeply psychological. So that would be my recommendation on the French side. On the Japanese side, this is a really, really, really easy introduction just to see if you have the stomach for that nice blend of, smiling sadism that you frequently get in Japanese cinema, which is Battle Royale. I just think that's a really good testing the waters, dip your toe in kind of film.
Right.
So that's what I always recommend to people first.
Excellent. Yes, everyone take note. There's definitely been a common theme here of new French extremity, and I would agree, right? So I would say High Tension, yes, In My Skin. Trouble Every Day is one of my absolute favorite new French films. So and I'm also going to throw Raw into there. Just in that general theme of, it's like they play with some kind of like transgressive concepts or ideas, but they're not so, let's say, like dramatic, melodramatic, or a sense of like so explicit, like everybody said probably more articulately, that I think it's easy. So my co-host Jess, I've shown her numerous new French extremity because I feel like, because there's a lot of like wonderful kind of themes that are also at play here, a lot of like narrative structure and stuff like that. There's a story behind it that I think that people would relate to it. And I like that we're talking about women. That's why we're all here. And that's why I started this whole day of panels. So we have this unique perspective. So I agree. So I would say yes to those films. The other ones, I would say yes to Necromantic. Again, maybe kind of where you're at, but it's more of a romance. It's fine. My other one I would throw it into the mix is called Be My Cat, which is more of like a found footage film that has, if there's any kills, they're off screen. It's not explicit whatsoever. It's more of the unseen stuff and just the sense of unease and just the threat of violence that I think was really effective in that. And the guy is such a creep. And I think that is a nice little movie to check out.
And we have to say too that extreme horror is not all going to be gouge your eyes out on screen.
Totally.
Right?
Exactly.
It's thematic. It's the subversive, the themes, like the things like we've said before that nobody wants to talk about. So it's not like all of these movies are going to be like really gory or explicit.
Yeah,
like when you think extreme, you think like Human Centipede, all people ass to mouth, right? Like, no, it's not all that.
Yeah.
And I think that's why like Necromantic is a perfect example of that kind of thing. It's the thematic thing. So yeah.
Totally.
I also like the Facebook user who recommended Baskin.
Yes.
Because that's an excellent one.
Yes.
Definitely.
Love
Turkish horror.
Baskin. Absolutely. No, I love this. That horror itself is a very unique, diverse genre, and same with extreme horror. You're going to get so many different types of films and creators and themes and ideas that it's really amazing. So again, if you're up for exploring it, it's worthwhile. So my next question is, so now that we're talking about the intro, what are some films that you think people should avoid at all costs until they're absolutely ready?
I'll go. I would say there are some that I think people, you have to really dig. And I think if we're talking about intro into this, people aren't even going to find some of these, movies that we might want to throw out. But others, I think, like a Serbian Film, I would throw that out there, which I think is a really beautiful movie in some ways, and it's really well, like the cinematography is great and everything. But I would say, like, let's just hold off on Serbian Film. There's a movie called Grotesque that's out of Japan.
Japanese.
I would say probably steer clear of that one for a while.
Yeah.
And then Trauma. Kelly, I think you talked about.
Oh, absolutely. Do not watch Trauma.
I would say don't watch that yet. Hold off. Those are my three.
I would maybe add Atros also to that one. Okay. Maybe depending on how okay, so it's on a lot of lists. I don't know if people are going to come across it easily or not, but Slaughtered Vomit Dolls. Yeah. I think 1 and 2 of the Guinea Pig movies are pretty extreme. The rest is kind of comical by the time. Yeah. I mean, number 6 is literally a mermaid that, they start painting with her pus, and it's like a fever dream. It's hilarious at one point. And there was one more. What was it? Darn it. I'll come back to it later.
Oh yeah, no, totally. Ariel?
Well, I really feel like with anything, it's kind of about knowing your own personal limits and your own personal triggers, and always making sure that you're honoring like the things that are personally difficult for you. So if newborn porn sets off alarms in your head, to avoid, Serbian Film, that you might want to stay away from certain other things when you hear certain other phrases as well. And Atros, I'm sorry to disagree with you slightly on Atros, Rabia, because I think Atros is remarkable specifically for populations that don't necessarily see themselves represented in horror a lot of the time.
That is true.
For my non-binary friends, I tend to recommend Atros as an entry point within extremity, but you need to be aware that there is rape, there's incest, there's horrible everything. I'm not gonna
Yeah.
anyway, but
Lots
it's
of
a
trigger
wonderful
warnings.
film, and it's a
Yeah.
wonderful film, but it is at core a political message, and so
Absolutely.
it doesn't exist to torture you for the sake of torturing you, the same way that I feel films like Trauma kind of are inflicting on you for the sake of inflicting on you.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Excellent. I would say anything faux snuff, like the August Underground, that has little kind of narrative structure to it. Faux snuff films are, that's going to be a lot, especially if you're thinking that something is going to have some kind of plot or storyline. No. Though this is sometimes surprising and it will shock you when you find even normal movies have this, but like something like Cannibal Holocaust, predominantly films that showcase real animal death and torture and suffering. If you're not ready for that, and that is a big thing for a lot of people, stay away from it for sure, unless you kind of are ready. Like everybody has said, like if you're prepared, you kind of know what you're getting into, then okay. But anything of real animal deaths, though, they're like there are films that you wouldn't even expect. Friday the 13th, they chop the head off a real snake. So things like that you wouldn't even think exist in our quote regular films actually do. It's really a whole topic in and of itself. But I would say if that really upsets you, Cannibal Holocaust, Cannibal Ferox, some Miriam Dora films, like maybe just stay away from those.
Both necromantic.
The necromantics with the bunny.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right, of course.
Does show real
Yeah.
animal death. Thankfully,
Yeah.
not created just for said films. But yeah, no, exactly. I still look away. I'm a vegan. I still look away. It's a thing. And I would throw into there maybe some rape revenge films. They can be intense, and I think that is like more of like a personal preference, like big warning. If this is going to like deeply upset you, then maybe stay away from it, because some of them can be pretty graphic. So that's my 2 cents on what you should avoid. Last question is, we've come all this way. So when do you think someone is no longer considered a newbie, but is actually becoming a fan of extreme films? What is that line where you're like, no, actually, I'm digging this. I am a converted fan. What do you think? Where does that lie? Maybe it's a movie or like an epiphany or something, but when do you think somebody is no longer considered like a new person? They don't need intro films. They need something else.
I think it's when you're confronted by a shocking scene or moment and you receive the shock, like you're like, oh, but you're also like impressed. Like you're like, yeah, they went for it. Like they went there and they, that actually happened for me when I watched Megan is Missing, and it was right after you posted about it, Kelly. Because I was like, what's the deal with this TikTok fucking movie?
Oh no.
It's controversial, not only for its subject matter, but a lot of people just think it's a terrible movie. But I have to say, there were a couple things I was like, whoa. And
me too.
I was like upset by it, to be honest. There were a couple of things I was like, yeah, it hit my personal trigger, but I was also like, I was impressed that the director was like, well, I'm going to put my message out there and I'm just going to go this far. I'm just going to do that. And maybe impressed is the wrong word, but just sort of in awe of the audacity. The audacity, you're like, wow. And yeah, and I feel like for me, once I learned how to hold that feeling in addition to my own processing of certain things that hit my triggers, I was like, okay, maybe I'm starting to build, I don't know, the capacity to be a fan and like to seek more of these movies out and be prepared for it. And I think a big part of that is having a community to talk about it, because I experienced so many of these films in isolation, literally squinting at my laptop being like, what? And like not, oh geez. And like not having people to talk about or process these films with afterwards. So that's why what the Spinsters are doing today is such a beautiful thing, especially with all women, because you're like just creating this place where we can all be like, weird.
What the fuck?
For this. Like, it's so great. So anyway, it's a rambling answer, but
great. I'm sorry. Now I've lost track of who I've asked. Anyways, who's next? Maybe Rabia, do you want to
okay,
go
well,
next?
Yeah, I can go next. For me, it's basically, I think the moment that you've seen an extreme movie and you've gotten a taste for it and you want more is already when you can consider yourself not a newbie anymore. And for some people, it takes 4 movies to, trigger that taste and that feeling like, oh, I want more of this. And for some people, it's like one title and they're hooked. They're like, okay, where can I find that iceberg? I need to go all the way deep. Take me on this ride. So it's a very personal experience. It's different for everyone. And I think that's the beauty of it as well, because some people are extremely excited after one film, and some take 8 movies to go into it and finally go like, you know what? I think I actually like extreme movies. So it's a little journey of self-discovery. But I think the moment that you decide as a person that you're interested in extreme movies is when you can take off the newbie label and just go into it. So it's not a formula or anything of the sort. Like, oh, you have to see these 3 films, otherwise you're not cool enough to be part of the Extremity Club. We're not gatekeeping over here. So yeah, no, if you're interested and you saw one and you think you want to see more, give one of us an @ and we'll give you the list. No worries. It's open for everyone. This tribe is open for cool people.
You can
Everybody's
sit
cool.
with us.
Yes, you can sit with us.
We lost Allison for some reason. Hopefully she comes back. Technology. Ariel.
Well, I really like Rabia's answer because I think it is so important to acknowledge that, like, we aren't not here to be gatekeepers of like what is extreme horror and where do you cross that threshold. I mean, really, in my opinion, just, looking at that threshold and saying, I am attracted to what is on the other side there, is really the important impulse to recognize in yourself and follow. And I think, there are so many people who follow that track for different reasons. What's weird is I was actually in a student film that was an extreme horror film before I actually became a real devotee of extreme horror cinema. But it was kind of a situation where I realized that just the attraction to the script in and of itself made me feel like I was a part of this club. The fact that I wanted to be a part of my friend's movie, okay, then there is something in me that honors something within you, and therefore we will go along that path. And but I'm with Rabia. I really don't think it should be about one specific moment, turning point, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. I like the point of and some people might watch one of these movies, even an intro movie, and just think, you know what? No, I just, even these intro movies, I can't go any further. This is just too much, a wild imagination or just anything, just personally, it's just, I think for me, when I knew, it's just when you watch a movie and it just stays with you. And then you want to watch it again. And you're like, yep, nope, this is what I'm interested in. This is, I get this now. I get it, quote unquote. And I kind of see what this genre is giving me and what its purpose is and what's going on here. And you're right. I want to see more. I want to know what's beneath that iceberg. I'm just so curious. And that's why I rewatched Trauma last night. Cause I was like, that movie has been in my mind since I watched it for the first time a couple of months ago, and I can't stop thinking about it. I had to write about it. I had to just I need to know everything about all of this right now. So I think that's kind of like the point for me. And just want to put it out there to the folks that are watching. Please, if you have any questions, we've got about 10 to 15 minutes left of this panel. So if you do have questions for any of our guests or myself, please throw them into the chat and we'll get there. We do have one question from Ben Horrible on Twitter. Since the recommendations are heavy on this one, I wanted to drop this resource, a crowdsourced trigger warning archive, doesthedogdie.com.
Benjamin.
Absolutely.
Nice, Ben. saving us.
Absolutely. The most important thing we all need to know about every movie we watch: does the dog die? Does the cat die? Mainly they have
Very
dogs in this.
important. Yeah.
Cats are always the antagonist or the jump scare.
They're
Never,
always the
never a
jump scare,
protagonist.
I recently went through a global horror list about Italy with one of my co-hosts who I do with Andrew Pope, and there were literally at least like 4 or 5 black cat movies called
Huh.
and we were like, how many evil cats can there be?
I mean, it's Italian gialli all
Yeah.
over the place.
Yeah.
Have you been to Rome? They're everywhere.
It's so sad.
Yeah, well, mine are 2 very, very fluffy, very kind Brits, so we're good. Although I have to admit, I sometimes wonder, like, if I would like drop dead, which of my cats would eat me first? That
That's a
is
good
something
debate.
I do think about. Like, okay, are they plotting to kill me in my sleep, and which one would eat me first? Just to stay on the theme.
First of all, the correct answer is yes, they
Yeah.
are plotting to eat you. I think we've seen definitive scientific proof that your cats will eat you.
Yes.
Start with the nose. Yeah.
So, just be aware of what you take into your body so that it doesn't affect your cats adversely.
Yeah.
True.
Good
Gotta
advice,
be
good
healthy
advice.
nutrients for those kitties.
Yes.
Oh, I'm so sad that Allison is gone and still can't come back, but I don't want to like jump on my phone and look for messages. Anyways, we have 10 minutes left. So far, no questions. Is there anything else anybody else has to say for, newcomers to the genre that maybe hasn't been brought up yet? Any little comments, tidbits, words of wisdom?
I have an interesting thing that you can check out on Reddit. There is this trend of creating icebergs on different topics, and there is an extreme horror iceberg. If you're getting into horror, the first 2 tiers are something you can probably get through easily, but that's a good one to test the waters. It will get to the stuff that we discussed, I think, in tier 2 and 3. Don't go further down on tier 5, because then we get into the non-fiction realm. But if you want someone who has done the research on each and every title that is mentioned in an iceberg, you can check out Wendy Goon on YouTube or Spooky Rice, which are 2 channels that really go in. Especially Spooky Rice does only extreme horror and extreme comics and stuff.
Cool.
And they're really interesting. So if you're like, ooh, I don't know if I want to tip my toes in this, I kind of want to get a feel of what this movie is about before I watch the whole thing, you can check out those videos on Spooky Rice. I wish I had like a female creator to recommend as well, but I currently don't have one at the top of mind.
Zobo with the shotgun.
Zoe. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah. Zoe's podcast, Zobo with the Shotgun, does a really great job of kind of describing and delineating exactly what the major plot points are of every individual horror movie that she goes through, as well as discussing it in an intelligent way. And so I know a lot of people who refuse to watch the thing until after they've heard all about it and want all the details about what they're going to see.
Yeah.
So
that's
and
great.
I have to say that I think I think when you're first starting to watch these movies, like I think it was Allison that was saying, she was watching it alone, right? And then she didn't really have anybody to talk to about it. And I was kind of the same way. I mean, we probably all were, at least like before, social media and all that kind of stuff. And I do think that it's nice to kind of reach out to people that have similar, these similar tastes. If you get a taste for it and you like it and you want to like keep delving in, reach out to any of us and go to Zobo with a Shotgun and listen to her podcast, go to That's Dark, listen to that podcast, and kind of, because like a lot of times after these movies, you really are processing what you just saw. And that's not the way it is with normal horror movies usually. It's not like you have to go and process. Like I love writing about extreme horror because I think a lot of it is, it needs some defending, and a lot of it's really gorgeous, and a lot of the subversive, transgressive nature of these movies will really make you feel. And so, you don't have to sit alone with it. That's some advice that I would give, because reach out to somebody and be like, whoa, this just fucked me up. And then talk about it. It's fun. It's fun to talk about, and it's also just like good to kind of understand why you feel like the way that you feel. And sometimes these feelings come up, with stuff that's not like outright. Well, obviously, it's not newborn porn. Sometimes it's just a scene that kind of stuck with you. So that would be my advice for sure.
Definitely. To latch on to that, because Ariel and myself are very active on Clubhouse, which is audio-based social media, and we often do stuff like watch parties or discussions and such. So if you don't want to type and you really want to talk to a person, I'd say add us on Clubhouse. And you can find us in rooms very often talking about extreme horror, actually. We're known for it. We're the Gore sisters in that sense.
Nice. Can you both like just remind me and like send me a lot of these links, like the Clubhouse stuff and whatnot.
Sure.
And like these Reddit recommendations and stuff. I started making notes. Anyway, send me some of that and I'll start sharing them too over the next like week or so. So thank you. I just want to touch base because we have 2 questions. So we'll start with, I'll go back to Jess's in a second, but Ben from Twitter, do we think there are benefits to watching extreme horror?
I say absolutely.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
For me, like I now have a column at Ghouls Magazine about disability in horror, and my intro column was kind of a deep dive into my own personal biography in terms of how extreme horror has sort of psychologically prepared me for a lot of the things that I've gone through as traumas in my life. And I feel very strongly that for those of us who've experienced a lot of trauma at different levels, extreme horror can serve several different functions. It can either help you process that trauma that you've already experienced, or it can help you kind of prepare for the traumas that you're going to face in the future and that you're going to have to face in the future. Yeah. And so for me, that's incredibly important. And it serves a very useful purpose, I think.
Yeah. I loved your intro because I was like, this is essentially a love letter to extreme horror. And this is fantastic. I love this. So eloquently said and written and passionate and heartfelt. I was like, yes. So folks, go and read that new column. Absolutely.
Definitely.
Jerry, how about you? Do you think there's benefits to watching extreme horror?
I mean, there's
beautiful filth
for me. Yeah. I mean, I think that what we've said here today so far is what we've really touched on a lot of things that I think are benefits, I mean, like really digging in to how we think and feel and kind of not being afraid of looking at things that are normally hidden.
Yeah.
I think it's important, I mean, how often do we push our shit down? Right? Like, I mean, just in general in life, we're afraid. It's women especially, we kind of grow up in fear, right? Starting very young, we learn that the world is a scary place, whether we're taught it or we experience it. Processing, like Ariel said, it's a good, not for everyone, obviously. Not everyone's going to get the same kind of benefits, but if you realize as you're watching something, wow, this is making me really look at why I think this way and why I'm getting these feelings and just having this bodily reaction, physiological reaction to what I'm seeing. Unless you're just there for the fun of it, right? Which is also awesome and great. And some people just really love hardcore gore, which is do that. But if you go into it like that and then also come out of it thinking about deeper things, then I think that's a huge benefit. But again, sometimes you just want to watch fucked up shit, and that is also fun.
Also a valid life choice.
Absolutely. We are here to tell you that is okay. Do it. Have fun.
We all just happen to analyze things because we're writers.
But we also have fun. We don't never forget to have fun. How about you, Rabia? Anything to add to that? Any benefits to watching extreme horror?
I kind of feel same as both Ariel and Jerry has said, and especially like you kind of build a thicker skin, and it's the same for me. It's definitely the same for me. Nothing to add.
Excellent. I would say absolutely echoing everything that everybody has said. It just can also change how you view the world because you're really being seen what the world has to offer, or in a negative way, like the negative aspects of some really terrible things that happen in the world that you don't get in quote regular horror movies. And it's fictionalized, even if some of it's maybe based on a true story or inspired by true events, or it's politically charged because you're a Serbian film and you have that kind of aspect and that kind of lean into it. But it's been a year and a half of me watching a lot of these films, and it will affect you and it'll change how you feel. And watch something like Martyrs, which maybe on the scale, again, thresholds and everything is different, but that will transform you literally. That's just how it is. So these movies have that ability to change how you think, how you feel, and how you view the world and how you view yourself. And it's just a very introspective genre if you allow it to take you there. Anyways. Yeah,
definitely.
There is one last question, then we'll wrap this up. Jess, my co-host, had asked, what are your thoughts on those icebergs? They change often. We kind of touched on this, and that was really big on the internet a month ago or whatever. I watched some videos this morning of people's thoughts and opinions on extreme horror, and that came up again. But yeah, you get to the end of it, the very bottom of the iceberg, and then it's I would say nonfiction, but it's all real, fetish, pornography, real deaths and stuff like that, which isn't horror, because horror is a fictional thing. So I think it's kind of dumb. I think it should be more, if you want to have that kind of iceberg or that kind of stepping stone of here's step one, and then when you get to the top, that's the kind of stuff. But keep that all the real stuff, or stuff that has real elements to it, like some Mondo films that throw in fictional and non-fictional stuff, but keep the horror and actual films in one. I would like to see that exist, because that kind of viral iceberg, it starts with actual films and then devolves into
snuff and porn, basically,
which is not the same at all.
Well, I think what it sounds like is that there's an opportunity for people like us to collaborate and create an actual good iceberg. Because I think this is very much made from one singular perspective and identity. And it's good because it went viral and it helped, in general, people introduced to more extreme horror. But I think if we want to fine tune it and actually bring more perspectives into it, bring more identities into it, I think people like us should collaborate and actually make a proper
Let's do it.
iceberg.
You've now volunteered us to do it.
Yes. So basically what I'm saying is we should sit together and make an iceberg. That's actually what I'm saying.
Oh my God. Does that mean I have to join Clubhouse now? I don't even know what I'm doing. I barely know what I'm doing today.
Oh my goodness.
Rabia will get everyone to join the cult.
Yes.
And
once you're
I'm gonna write it
in,
down.
oh my goodness. We'll be femmes of horror on there. Trust me, the water's warm and it's corona free. So you can safely get in and it's going to be a warm welcome. Especially locally, I live in Europe. I am a brown, caramel woman. And I was very isolated, also pre-corona, just by the fact that people won't hire someone who looks like me. It doesn't matter how much skill I have, doesn't matter, the list of accolades that I can and references that I can give them. Locally and here in Europe, if you work in the arts and culture sector, you have to be a white man to really get acknowledged, or you have to have 15 papers and a very fat bank account to get into panels and things and stuff. So I do a lot of stuff locally, but more on indie level, and then abroad in Asia and in America, it's not a problem. People accept me more for who I am. But I was isolated. I couldn't travel. I couldn't go anywhere. I couldn't express myself. And then knowing that I could get on to Clubhouse and find my tribe and find Ariel there, which was for me one of the best things that has happened through Clubhouse. I can definitely recommend it. You can talk to people. You don't have to type. You don't have to show your face. It's low threshold, but you can enter into communities that normally feel that you have been, sectioned off of because of your identity or not being able to find the people who will accept you for who you are. And that Clubhouse is a really good platform for that. Yeah.
And I'm going to put in one additional little plug for Clubhouse, not to be too much of an infomercial, but I'm just going to say that I would not have gotten my film made if it weren't for the wonderful horror community that there is on Clubhouse. Like, the horror community on Clubhouse is really phenomenal. And so I highly recommend it to any filmmakers out there, any writers out there, anyone who wants to get stuff done in horror. That's amazing.
All right. So I'm going to wrap that up now. Allison was having a whole bunch of mic issues. Anyway, she says, thanks for, nice meeting everyone. Thanks for having her. So that's it for panel number 1 out of 3 today. So thank you to all of my wonderful guests, my heartfelt appreciation and love and adoration, and you're inspiring and I adore you. So thank you. And as well, Jessica behind the scenes, taking care of everything. Thank you so much. She's my little tech gremlin for today. So I hope to see everybody watching back here at 5 p.m. Eastern time for the next panel, which is Women in Extreme Horror. Stay grim, folks. We'll see you later.